ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome to the Minister's Press Briefing here at the Ministry of Information. This morning, we have invited you at the instance of the Minister for Mines and Natural Resources, together with his Deputy Minister and Chief Executive Officers of the Minerals Commission and the Mineral Income Investment Fund. They are here to talk about Ghana's first lithium contract, the terms, benefits, and the way forward. If you are joining us from the comfort of your homes or offices, this press briefing is live on GTV, Metro TV, Joy News, City TV, Asempa FM, Adum TV, Asasi Radio, Movement TV, Kesben TV, and ABC News GH. We are also streaming on Facebook at Ministry of Information. Today's briefing will take 4 parts. First, we will take the Minister's address, and then we will take 2 presentations from the Minerals Commission and the Minerals Income Investment Fund, and then we will come back to you for the Q&A session. But before I yield to the Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to acknowledge some dignitaries who are here with us. I would like to acknowledge all directors from the Ministries of Lands and Natural Resources and Ministry of Information. We also have with us the Technical Director for Mines, Mr. Peter Ewua. Also with us is the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, Mr. Martin Kweku Aisi. Also with us this morning is the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Income Investment Fund, MIF, Mr. Edward Nanaya Okranting. Also with us is the Advisor on Mines to the Minister, Mr. Benjamin Aye. We also have with us the Chief Director of the Ministry of Information, Madame Charlotte Morgan-Asiedu. We are also joined by the Deputy Minister for Lands and Natural Resources and Member of Parliament of Takwan Swayem Constituency, Honorable George Mirekuduka. And as I mentioned earlier, we have with us the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources and Member of Parliament for Damongo Constituency, Honorable Samuel Abujinapo. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I will yield to the Honorable Minister for his address, and then we will come back to you for the next part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. The Honorable Deputy Minister for Information, Madam Fatih Abubakari. My Deputy Minister responsible for Mines, Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Income Investment Fund, our friends from the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources is grateful to the Ministry of Information, as always, under the able leadership of its Minister, Honorable Kojo Ponkroma, for putting this platform together this morning to enable us engage the Ghanaian public on the first mining lease signed for the exploitation of lithium in our country. We are grateful. We also thank you, the media, for always responding to our invitation and for helping us reach the Ghanaian people wherever they may be on such matters of national importance. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, you will recall that at a brief ceremony at the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources on Thursday, 19th October 2023, I signed on behalf of the President of the Republic the first mining lease for the exploitation of lithium in our country. This followed Cabinet's approval of a policy for the exploitation and management of green minerals in our country, and extensive negotiations spanning several months between government and Barari DV Limited, a subsidiary of Atlantic Lithium Limited, which President Akufo-Addo had to, on some occasions, personally intervene. Since this act, there has been some commentary on the mining lease under reference, with several people and institutions sharing their opinion on the transaction. Government welcomes the extraordinary public interest and scrutiny of this mining lease, as it is the surest way of ensuring that the mineral resources of our country are utilized for the benefit of the Ghanaian people, as dictated by our national constitution. We, however, note that much of the commentary ignore the actual terms of the lease, which I am told is available on the website of the Minerals Commission. On 27th October 2023, I issued a 26-point press release detailing the processes leading to the grant of the mining lease and giving highlights of the lease, which obviously differs from all previous mining leases granted for the exploitation of any mineral in our country. This is easily verifiable from a cursory examination of the mining lease under reference. Regrettably, some public commentary on the matter continues to ignore all these details. In recognition of our constitutional duty to manage the natural resources of the country for the benefit of the Ghanaian people, who are the true owners of these resources, therefore, and in accordance with the highest standards of transparency and integrity, we have called this press conference to provide once again detailed information to the Ghanaian people on the processes leading to the signing of the mining lease, as well as details of the lease that makes it different from all previous mining leases. And if I should emphasize, and most importantly, how this mining lease benefits our nation. This will be done by the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission. But distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before I invite the Chief Executive Officer to address us, kindly indulge me to clarify a few issues. Firstly, Barari DV Limited, the company granted the mining lease for the exploitation of lithium in Ewoya, has been undertaking exploration for almost a decade in the central region of Ghana. From when they were first granted a recognizance license in August 2012, which was subsequently converted to a prospecting license in March 2018 for 3 years, and renewed for 3 additional years in July 2021, Barari DV Limited has been engaged in reconnaissance, exploration, and prospecting for all these years. As I say, let me emphasize, from August 2012. When they reported commercial find of lithium, government took a decision not to treat this mineral in the same manner in which others had been treated in the past. We therefore decided to make a policy for the exploitation and management of lithium and other green minerals of our country before any form of negotiations will commence. To make the development of the policy more participatory, on 13 July 2022, I presented to Parliament, on behalf of government, a statement setting out the general framework of the proposed policy for the development, management, and exploitation of the green minerals in our country. Following input from honorable members of Parliament and other stakeholders, a policy was developed by the ministry and submitted to Cabinet, which, after intense scrutiny, critique, and inputs, approved a reviewed policy on 27th July 2023. The approved policy includes provisions for an increase in the royalties rate for green minerals, an increase in state and Ghanaian participation in all green mineral operations to a minimum of 30%, just like Geodec and Gisdec, just like bauxite and iron ore, to a minimum of 30%. An enhanced local content and local participation, including listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange, and value addition and beneficiation for all green minerals in our country. It was based on this policy that we entered into negotiations with the company, leading to the signing of the mining lease. Ladies and gentlemen, respectfully, let me forcefully state that this lease differs from all previous mining leases in many respects, and the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission will shortly, as I say, give you details to support this claim. Suffice for me to point out that it is the first time in the history of our country that we have successfully negotiated for 10% royalties for any mineral, which is one of the highest for exploitation of any mineral across the world. If you indulge me, I'll repeat that. I say it is the first time in the history of our country that we have successfully negotiated for 10% royalties for any mineral, which is one of the highest for exploitation of any mineral across the globe. We have already secured a 19% state participation in this mining company, 19%, with a requirement to scale it up to a minimum of 30% Ghanaian participation through listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange for shares to be made available to Ghanaians and Ghanaian entities. What this simply will mean is that when it is all over, Barari DV Limited, the holder of this mineral right of lithium, Ghanaian and state participation will be 30%. Foreign participation will be a maximum of 70%, but Ghanaian participation will be a minimum of 30%. This has never happened in the history of our country in respect of any mineral. Never. Ladies and gentlemen, and for the first time in the history of our country, a mining lease contains provisions for the establishment of a refinery, that is value addition and beneficiation. This mining lease has provision which insists that a refinery will be established here in Ghana for processing of this lithium, this mineral. This has never happened. This is the first time. There's been the issue of ratification of the mining lease, and there's been a lot of commentary on that. And it's been raised by several people. And if you allow me, I want to deal with that briefly. This has never been lost on us, as this is expressly provided for in the mining lease granted to Barari DV Limited. Specifically, Clause 1E of the lease states, and I quote, "The mining lease is subject to ratification by Parliament in accordance with Article 2681 of the Constitution and Section 5(4) of Act 703. And he continues, "Upon execution of this mining lease, the minister shall cause the mining lease to be laid in Parliament for ratification," end quote. By the very terms of the lease, therefore, ratification by Parliament is a condition precedent. And as the Supreme Court explained in the Eston Cubic case, an unratified mining lease confers no enforceable rights, and government has always been mindful of this decision. The mining lease in question will be laid before Parliament for ratification. That is non-negotiable. But before such agreements can be laid before Parliament, it must go through a number of processes, including securing Cabinet's approval. The processes are ongoing, and once completed, the agreement will be laid before Parliament for consideration and hopefully ratification. There have also been calls to grant mining leases through a tender process, and I want to deal with that as well. As we explained in our earlier press release, international best practice requires that where a company undertakes exploration and makes a commercial find for minerals, the company is entitled to a right of first refusal to the grant of a mining lease, subject to regulatory compliance. This international best practice is given legal backing by Section 39(2) of the Minerals and Mining Act 206, Act 703. Needless to point out that the use of the tender process is only feasible where there already exists geological statistics and the state is looking for partners to go straight into mining. if I may explain, is if the state spends its own hard money to conduct the exploration and makes a find, a commercial find, then if the state wants partners to go into mining, then you go through the tender processes. But where a private company comes in to invest and makes a commercial find, by law and by international best practices, the company has a legal right of first refusal. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also indicate that Regulation 2581 of the Minerals and Mining Licensing Regulations 2012 LI 2176, which deals with the grant of mineral rights by tender, gives these instances under which such process may be used. And they are: 1, where the Minerals Commission determines that there exists sufficient mineral information in respect of the area concerned; 2, where the Republic has carried out prior mineral exploration in respect of the area concerned; or 3, where an area becomes available through surrender, revocation, or termination, and 2 or more applications are recorded in the priority register within the 7 days of that area becoming vacant. End quote. In all these circumstances, the state will have enough geological data generated through its own exploration, or where a holder of a mineral right surrenders his interest, or the right is otherwise revoked or terminated. But there is enough statistics generated by a private company that has carried out exploration at great cost, then that entity is, by virtue of Section 39(2) of Act 703, entitled to the grant of a mineral right subject to regulatory compliance, in which case the tender system cannot be legally tenable. The historical lack of resources to undertake exploration has thus meant that we have had to depend on private companies to undertake exploration of most of our minerals, which then entitles them to the grant of mining leases without going through the tender process. And as I say, Barari DV Limited got their first recognizance license as far back as August 2012. They established that legal right as far back as August 2012. And in any event, ladies and gentlemen, the private sector, both foreign and Ghanaian, participation is in accord with best international practice, and this can be verified from several mining countries across the world. It is the private sector that normally engages in exploration. There have also been calls for the establishment of a GHANA lithium company to undertake lithium mining and develop the value chain of the mineral from lithium mining to battery production. And I would like to deal with this too. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, it will be recalled that the policy statement presented to Parliament last year considered the option of establishing an entity along the lines of the Ghana Integrated Aluminium Development Corporation, GIADEC, and the Ghana Integrated Iron and Steel Development Corporation, GISDEC. However, the volumes of the mineral we have currently and our quest to ensure optimal benefit for the exploitation of this mineral meant that option was not feasible for several considerations. Firstly, globally, only China has an end-to-end lithium value chain. This is why we have instituted in this transaction the retention of a significant part of the value chain, which we will work systematically to eventually construct here in our country the full value chain for lithium. But as we have said, we will not export lithium in its raw form. Everything we have done in respect of this transaction and all the measures we have put in place in respect of this particular transaction will mean that Ghana's lithium resources will not be exported in their raw state. That is why the mining lease includes provisions for the establishment of a refinery and the provision of the use of other linkages to support local industries in Ghana. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in everything we have done with this mining lease, in all humility and modesty, the interest of the Ghanaian people has been paramount. It has been months of thorough negotiations and hard work in respect of this transaction. Nothing has been agreed to casually. Everything has been thought through and everything has been worked out and all the options have been considered. And what we've arrived at is in the ultimate interest of the good people of Ghana. The government of President Akufo-Addo remains committed to the prudent, effective, and efficient management of the natural resources of our country, which have been entrusted to us, and doing so in the spirit of transparency, integrity, candor, and utmost good faith for the benefit of our nation. We remain focused on this goal and call on you all, nationals and residents of our country, to support government in this quest. With this, ladies and gentlemen, and I invite the Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, Mr. Martin Ayisi, to present to you the terms, benefits, and way forward of the Barare DV Limited lithium mining lease. I thank you for your attention.
Minister, thank you very much. You've actually made life easy for me, so I may skip some of my slides. Minister, this is raw lithium. I'll pass it around. So those of you, so this is what he said will not go out in a raw form. So this is lithium. Well, if you take it out, it is no use to you. Because the quantity you need to get something out of it, that is it. Let's go to the first slide. I think Minister has spoken a lot about this, so I could as well skip it. The slides will be made available when we finish. So I'll save time. You can also skip this one. Hang on for a second, go back. So my presentation will take this format. The background, the project, the policy for the negotiations, which Minister talked about. I'll just go into a fine detail. Then the lithium value chain, the terms and benefits, and then the way forward. Next slide. For those of you who don't know the green minerals, I provided a table of a few of them. And if you look at, you can see lithium runs throughout. There's a column for electric vehicles, the kind of minerals that you use. There's a column for renewable energy and energy storage, and then the electronics. You can see lithium is all over the place. So, again, this will be made available. Next slide. I'll skip this one because Minister has spoken a lot about it. You can skip this one. Yes, Minister, it's important we put things in perspective. What are our critics saying? First, they said we should look at the emerging practice in Latin America. And then what Minister said a short while ago, they said you should adopt competitive bidding or JVs or service contracts. There's no doubt about that, and nobody will doubt that. That is transparent, like Minister said. Yes, you can maximize the rent, and of course, you get a higher value because you know what is there. Then you secure a greater value for the state. And then I think what he said before he took his seat, he said we should establish a special purpose vehicle, like GHANA or GISDA, to handle that. So essentially, if you look at all the commentaries, the criticisms, many of them center around this. This is just a summary of them. I'll discuss some of them as we go along. Next slide. I think, Minister, you said a lot about this. Again, this will be made available, the chronology of events. When he made those statements in Parliament, it was subject to a lot of debate, and then he highlighted the importance of it. And, of course, the memo that went to Cabinet. Next slide. So, eventually, Minister, I think you went public. I brought the paper here. You can see front banner headline after all this exercise. So, I think as the debates and discussions were going on, I think people were oblivious to the fact that there was a lot of policy considerations that went into all that we've done. Now, in brief, these are some of the things that were discussed in Cabinet. So even the criticisms from IE and co, you can see it is a third option there. So number one, we amend the current policy, which is nearly a decade, to incorporate provisions on green minerals. And then secondly, just have some guidelines to just do business as usual. Or the third one, prepare a completely separate policy and legal regime for green minerals and build it to the GHANA status. So it is nothing. So when we had IE and co, you realize that we've thought through this already. So it's unfortunate when we gave them the document by email and we said, look, come sit with us. Let's have all the discussion, give you the policy bank and considerations. They didn't mind us. In their first encounter, they didn't read. And then when they heard us, they asked for the document, we gave it to them and said, invite us. They did not invite us. So their point was even one of the policy considerations at cabinet. Next slide. So why did cabinet choose the option that we are using now? That is the option where we amend the current policy and include provisions on green minerals. These are the justification. One, we don't have geological data. I'm the CEO of Minerals Commission. I don't have any occurrence of lithium apart from what is in the Ewoya. There's no geological data. So take bauxite. Bauxite at Tiwa is known. It's been there since the Russians did that and Kwame Nkrumah. Ninyani, the deposits are known. We even have an existing mine at Awaso. So you are seeing two different scenarios where one deposit exists for which you have established GHADEC, and the other one, there's practically no information. We don't have any data on lithium as we speak. Then the other reason the minister mentioned is that Ewoya is relatively small, very small. I will show you some data besides. There are just 3 countries that control 70% of the world's deposit. Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, the so-called lithium triangle where their borders meet. And of course, Zimbabwe, which has the largest deposit in Africa, number 6 in the world, and also Mali. Let's go to the next point. So I've indicated this there. And I just got this information, Minister, from the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency. That is our equivalent of GIPC. 160 applications, just 6 months. I can't point to 20 at Minerals Commission. It's all because of the prospectivity of their geology. 160 applications in 6 months. I've given the reference, you can check for yourself. They've gotten even 5 from US. The 160 is just from China. I've not even looked at the other countries from Asia. And then, as I said, we don't have any known deposits apart from Ewoya. There's nothing. The other one too is that you have to attract exploration, which is very high risk. This thing is 5% success. The chance of hitting it is just 5%. There are a lot of countries or companies that have come here and they've left. I'll give you an example. Birim Goldfields. They came to spend millions in Savannah. They didn't find gold. They are gone. We've given it out to small scale. And of course, we are competing with countries with better geology. Far better geology than us. Zimbabwe, Mali. And the grades are very high. I take Gulamina, for example, it's 1.38. Ewoya is 1.25. Then, of course, that is the reason why we did not go the graded route. The very route IEN and the other critics are talking about. These are the reasons. Other than that, what are you going to do? Do we get up and zone government Ghana into blocks and say people should come for competitive bidding? Where is the data? You have to take people to the data room. We don't have that information. So that is why option 1 was approved by cabinet. The next slide. Minister, as far as I'm concerned, most people didn't know that our law has provisions for competitive building. I think you mentioned it, but I'm putting it on the screen so that people can see it. So go and read. Again, go to our website. Go and read LI 2176, the licensing regulations. It makes detailed provisions for the use of competitive building. That is 275 and 258. He mentioned it, but you can see it is listed here. So that is our problem. Where's the data? We don't have it. So assuming for whatever reason, I hope it doesn't happen, we don't intend to do that. Let's say we withdraw Ewoya now. We'll go to competitive bidding because we have data. That's the kind of thing we are talking about. So most people didn't know that there is competitive building. In fact, ASEP made a statement that we should adopt that in our law. But it is already in our law. This is something they could have requested from us. Next slide. And then it goes on and on and on. But be that is may, we still make sure that we meet the 30% minimum requirement. So these are some of the things cabinet approved under option 1. Ensure that you change the law and enhance state participation to the same 30% minimum. Remember, minimum. So we could even go as far as 50 or 60. It all depends on the project economics. Then apart from that too, the minimum royalty is supposed to be 7%. Minimum 7. So we could even go higher, again, depending on the project economics, because some may have a low grade, some may have a higher grade. Next slide. These are the provisions. So, Mineral Income Investment Fund, he will talk about his part when we get there. He's supposed to hold the state interest. And then just look at the second point, mandatory listing. So when we hear people saying that, oh, you should have gone for 50%, why must everything go for the state? What about Ghanaians? So we said, let the state take 19%, the other minimum at least 30% or more. Let's take it to the stock exchange. And then at the stock exchange, it is being restricted to the lives of SNIDs and all those pension funds and individuals like you, or those who have money. So when we start the adverts and co, come and buy. Everything must not go to the state. So they did not capture that bit, that the state must not necessarily hold 50%, as even I saw yesterday from one Professor Jampo, who said if we don't get 50%, there will be militancy at Ewuya. That's what he said. And of course, we should also review this so that within the policy measures, that is a decision. Let's take the next slide. Now, look at this. 5 months ago, Minister, it's exactly 5 months. Look at the concentrate. What I'm passing around is a raw lithium. When you process it, you get a concentrate. That is the price. You look at the price, you see how it has fallen from nearly 4,000 to 1,655. It's falling. People are producing lithium now. Just 5 months. Look at the price. And then when you refine what the minister talked about, you can see the price in July, 42,000. As at yesterday, it is 1,711, 17,000. So clearly, the case for refining has been made 8-10 times. When you refine that rock I'm passing around, that is it. And then also, that is a stage. After that, you make the batteries, you do the cells, and then you assemble them. What we are worried is the fact that, or what we hear from people is the fact that we just end up number one. No. I'll talk more about that in the agreement. Let's move on. It's important when you are doing anything, you put it in context. Look at the statistics we have on the board. China has 13% reserves. And then, what do you call it? Australia, 52, 25. So just Chile and Australia produce almost about 80% of the lithium today. And then, of course, China dominates the midstream and downstream. So 44%. 44%. That is the concentrate. Can you go to the previous slide? I want to show you something. The 44%. No, the previous one. Previous. So that is it. Refinery. The refining stage where there's so much money. China alone controls 44%. Let's move on. And then you look at the tail end. As we are getting to the battery itself, China again comes in 77, 78%. So practically China dominates everything. That is it. Next slide. Now let's come to the terms which has generated so much controversy, and I've done some comparison here and there. So we are charging 10%. Means I've made life easy by providing the various clauses in the agreement so that you don't spend your time reading that 40-page document. So if you go to clause 20, you find it there. Australia is 5%. But Australia, as we speak, produces at least half of the world's lithium. 5% royalty. 10%, you can see, is there, 10%. Chile, which sits on 40% of the world's reserve, one country, Chile, known. Chile is saying that they want 51% JV, but they have data, they sit on 40%, one country. That's their royalty, 8 to 26, using the margin. So that's why he was happy on the point that outside Chile, we have perhaps the highest royalty in the world. And then, of course, Mali, 6%. And then Zimbabwe, 5%. You go to Mali, there's a project called Gulamina. It is 3 times the size of Ewuya. 3 times, 1 million tons. We are doing 350. Look at the royalty. If we had a Malian type of deposit, means I would have asked you to charge 40% royalty. Okay? and then Zimbabwe 5%. That is it. So you can look at it. And then those who even have more reserves and better grades than us are even charging this. They are raising to the bottom. Where do you expect people to take their high risk money? Again, let's look at free carry interest. Mali has 10%. Zimbabwe, there's no free carry interest. Latin America, there's nothing like free carry interest. So you have to look at the entire package. There's nothing like free carry interest in Australia. That is it. Next slide. Then these are the other ones. And then there's some controversy brewing about community development. Please, that 1% there, it is not an ownership issue. It's not an ownership issue. This is the first time, Minister, I would like to repeat, this is the first time in the history of Ghana that we are legislating directly into a contract for community to benefit. Right. What you go, you see the Newmont Harford Foundation, Edikan, Pesos, all those ones, they are voluntary. And it's even, yes, it's voluntary. So Newmont, for example, does 1% profit. What if they don't declare profit? And then 1% of an ounce, $1 of every ounce they sell. And this morning, the price of gold is 2,034. So 1% of that, and then 1% of profit. You can calculate that if it was 1% revenue. Yes, and every country in Africa has adopted 1%. That's a practice, anything between 0.5 and 1%. Fortunately, we have drafted a regulation to make community development agreement compulsory. Yes, we are the only country that have not done that. And the sad aspect is that you go to Tanzania, it is 1% CDA compulsory. Gita Mines pays it, that is Anglo Gold Ashanti. But here, it is voluntary. So that is it. And I did my calculation, the minimum, you are talking about $6 million. Yes, minimum, the minimum price, the one we use for the model. I'm not talking about the kind price. 1587, the one that was used in the feasibility. You're talking about $6 million. I asked the MC of Infantima, he says his common fund is $100,000, 1.2 million, which is his biggest source of revenue. So you can see this is really a game changer. That is it. So Aware has opened the doors for us to change everything about community development funding. That is it. Let's move on. And then, first part. Minister, I'll shock you this morning. In all the discussions, nobody has been talking about the other byproducts. So, FESPA, kaolin, which is in there. Of course, in addition to limestone and tack and clay, these are the 5 minerals that are used for ceramics. We have 5 ceramics companies in Ghana. Keda Ceramics, Jintao, Marco Polo, Waka, and Sentio, those who are doing oil. Now, they are the only ones in Tema. The other 4 are within the Nchama, Shama, Enclave. They are all using a gas pipeline. I checked the data this morning. They used 960,000 tons of FESPA at a grade of 8%. Aware, the discovery is 15 million tons. Divide by 12 years, divide by 1 year, 1,250,000. So, give and take, exactly the deposit defined in Aware is what is the market size now. But then currently, the nearly 1 million tons, these 5 companies use, they get it from the artisanal miners in Western and Central region. So we need to do something about it. In the agreement, we insisted that we'll make sure no FESPA or kaolin will be exported. So they were supposed to provide a feasibility study. This was given to me on Monday. Because we went to COP, I have not had the discussion of going through with you. Next week, I'll get a full feasibility. So by next week, we will know what to do with our FESPA in Ghana. So if they are saying that establish Ghana Lithium Company to take advantage of all the value chain, we are already ahead of time. We don't want to behave like the gas pipeline where the warning was coming, will you be flaring, will you flare, will you flare? And then we started producing the gas, and then we were flaring. But by next week, we will know. In the agreement, we gave them 4 months up to February. We are in December. So this is for my eyes only, and you. So when we get a feasibility next week, we will now come to the block and say it. That is it. And interestingly, this is local content. This report, Minister, was done by UMAT. The company contracted UMAT to do it. local content. Yes, it was headed by Professor Mankwa, a renowned metallurgist. So it was not done by any expert from Australia or Canada anywhere. This was locally done by our own university, UMAT. It's here. And then it is also in the agreement that if they cannot establish a chemical plant, when a third party does it, they will have to supply the concentrate. That is it. That report has to be ready by February. By February, we will have that report. And then, of course, the MOU that was signed, this is what it has led to. Next slide. I've talked about this already. Feldspar, kaolin, and quartz. So they are used for ceramics. So, Minister, I was quite happy when I heard that we are planning to ban the importation of ceramics. I think I support that so much. So these are the kind of things we can use them for: ceramics, glass, etc. And then let us take note that construction is for 14 months. 14 months. You have to get EPA, you have to get all those things. So we are looking at somewhere by Easter or April next year. They still have to go to all those processes. Means that by that time, all these reports as to what to do with the Feldspar, the project economics of a chemical plant, we'll know that. We'll know that, and again, we'll come here and tell the people of Ghana. So by the time the man will be ready somewhere in the middle of 2025, we are ready to go. We are ready to go. So if the commentators have spoken to us, they will have gotten all this information. I will defer to Nanaya to discuss more of this, his part, because we heard also saying that we are paid too much. So he's here, he'll talk about it, what went into negotiations. And then that is it. So what are the way forward? I mean, what's the way forward? I will not waste your time. You had said the ratification is a must. That's why I put it in red. Minister, we have even put it in the agreement that the agreement is not valid until it is ratified. So we refer to clause 1E of the Barrels. It is stated there. So again, it was moot for our commentators to say that if the agreement is not ratified, you're a bad lawyer. It will be ratified. Again, they will have to secure environmental permit. They are working on it. They are working on the operating permit. And then they will also come back to Minerals Commission for all those permits. And then all these various reports, once we get them by February, we'll make a decision. So that is it. Let me say this. By February, we'll know whether or not we have to establish a chemical plant, whether they will do it or a third party will do it. We will know what to do with our Feldspar. We will know what to do with our kaolin. The quality here is 27%. The one they are buying from artisanal miners is 8%. So I'm even worried what the artisanal miners will do with this, because clearly all the 5 ceramics companies will buy from Ewoya. Why? Because the higher the grade, the less you spend. So that is it. So on that note, I would like to seek your permission to defer to Nanaya to complete the discussions. Thank you.
Honorable Minister for Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, Honorable Deputy Minister, ladies and gentlemen of the press, I believe this is the first time that Minerals Income Investment Fund, or MIF, is engaging the press. So I'd like to say a big thank you to the Minister for giving us that opportunity. We've been accused of being media shy and not appearing, but we're a typical financial institution, so sometimes we have to be a bit media shy. But before I delve into our part of the project or the role we play, I'd like to give a bit of perspective on what we do and just a brief on what Minerals Income Investment Fund is. Because I realized coming in that a number of the press do not really know or understand the role we play. So the Minerals Income Investment Fund is really a sovereign wealth fund. It was established by an Act of Parliament, 978, as amended. It was in line with the President's vision of ensuring that we garner value from the mining sector in a 360 way, that is from end to end, including the value delivery process and the value chain. So we essentially do 3 things. We are responsible for managing the equity interest of the government in all mining companies. So as you saw reference to the free carried interest, we manage the free carried interest. That means that all dividend payments come to MIF. The second important thing that we do, or the role we play, is that we are responsible for all the royalties that are paid by every mineral type. So these royalties are paid to MIF, collected by GRA, and then we manage these royalties. So how do we manage the royalties and the dividend? For the royalties, 20% goes to the Minerals Development Fund. That is through the fund that you see royalties going to the stool lands, the local government, etc. So that's 20% going to Mineral Development Fund. Then 2.4% is paid to the Ghana Revenue Authority. And then 2% stays with MIF for the operations of MIF. The other 75.6 goes into investment. So the purposes for which we've been set up is to ensure that we re-inject or reinvest these royalties and dividend back into the mining sector. So we end up taking more equity stake, for example, like we've done in Ashanti Gold, and we are doing presently with lithium. We support the value chain, injecting capital or equity in the value chain of the mining sector, with the whole idea from the president's vision of having a paradigm shift from what used to be in the past. Ironically, reference has been made to these agreements being colonial. But the whole idea of MIF, in line with the vision, is to ensure that we pump or re-inject capital back into the mining sector that will benefit Ghanaians. As regards our investment in Atlantic, I don't know who's responsible for the. Because my colleague CEO has actually gone through the fine details, I'll just give a brief on what our investment that led to Ghana having 19% really. So MIF is investing 27.9 million in Atlantic Lithium. We are its Ghanaian subsidiary, Bavari, which has been mentioned. This gives us a 6% interest in the company. So if you look at the 13% carried interest that we negotiated, Mincom negotiated, which we supported, and you add our 6%, that gives Government of Ghana 19%. Then of course, there's the 10% royalty that has already been mentioned, as you are aware, and that pleases us because that actually gives us extra cash to re-inject into the mining community or the mining value chain. The 10%, which is at variance to the 3 to 5% that we originally had, gives us about $624 million across the life of the mine. $624 million. Then we also subscribed to 19,245,574 Atlantic Holding Company shares. This has not been mentioned in the press, and for some reason we've not had this being commented on, but this is actually another feat that has to be highlighted. This means that Ghana government, through MIF, has 3% of the holding company of Atlantic. This allows us to piggyback on the back of Atlantic in their search or quest for other resources across the world. And this actually gives us a further board seat on Atlantic globally. Questions have been asked on how we worked on the valuation. I met a press person who asked me how we arrived at the valuation, and it's actually a very important point. At the time that we started negotiating, I think Minister made mention of the fact that we've been negotiating for months. We've actually been negotiating for 15 months, moving almost to 18 months really, but for 15 months, back and forth. At the time we started negotiating, the share price of Atlantic was around 0.61 pence. 0.61 pence. We were able to negotiate at a strike rate using a formula that we ended up agreeing with Atlantic on a 15-month weighted average, which came to 0.2598. That's 20 pence per share. As we speak right now, the Atlantic shares is around 0.333 pence. So even before putting money in, government of Ghana through MEF is actually making a gain before any production of lithium. And this is a strategy that we put in. So even before production is there, we are actually making money. We also negotiated warrants. This means that we negotiated to buy further shares at a lock price. Considering the fact that there's the likelihood of the share price going up, we locked the price at 0.33. And the current share price is just around that. We envisage that the share price will be going up when production comes in. So we may actually end up having maybe 0.78. You know, you can never tell, but we have a locked-in price, which means that even if the share price moves to 0.78, 0.66, government of Ghana is able to buy at 0.33, and we can decide to exercise that warrant or not. But imagine the share price getting to 1 and us buying further shares at 0.33. This is how we invest. That will give us an extra 4.5% into the company from the 3%. That's the holding company outside the 19% that government of Ghana has on the local entity. So we also negotiated further terms, and I think these were what I call the garnishing. We agreed that MEF should be allowed to participate in even processing up to 40% of the lithium that is produced here. The reason why we thought of this was because we're looking at the possibility of the company, because what we invested in covers all the tenements of the company. So in anticipation that there will be more lithium coming up, we said, look, we want to competitively bid for 40% of the lithium. Reason why we want to do this is to leverage on this and attract investors in the processing sector. That's the value chain. And then use these royalties, dividend, etc., to co-invest, and for Ghana to even have a higher stake in the value chain, in the processing value chain. So this is part of the agreement that MEF struck with Atlantic. The CEO of my colleague CEO of Mincom has already given quite a bit on the feldspar, and feldspar is extremely important. And as most media may be aware, our first exports under AFTA was actually ceramics. So we are pushing government to develop or push for a ceramic development strategy where we will add value to the ceramics industry. But Mr. EC has talked extensively about that. Then on the board representation, again, this is important. We've negotiated 2 seats on the local entity. That's the Barari, Atlantic Barari. Hitherto, it was 1 seat. For just 3% of our stake in the holding company, the Atlantic Global Company, which we can actually push by a further 4.5%, we've negotiated we've actually negotiated 1 board seat. This is a listed company, and this is important. Hitherto, you will never have the chance of having a government person sitting on the global entity. We don't have Newmont Worldwide having a government person on the Newmont board. But we've been able to negotiate this, and allows us to have some sort of bird's eye view on the operations of the holding company because of the stake we have in the company. Next slide, please. And then, of course, the most important bit, as a financial entity that is investing in this project, the Ghanaian people would like to see the gains and the financial benefits that are going to come up or come out from this project. I think I hate to say this because it's a listed company, but you understand. For us, we saw an opportunity. We are a typical financial institution. We saw an opportunity where we believe the shares were undervalued. And this is why we are even making more gains at present. With a locked-in price of 0.26, we're looking at an intrinsic value of the company ranging from 1.25 to 1.9 per share. So if you're looking at an intrinsic value of 1.26 to $1.9 per share, and you're buying it at 0.26 and now 0.33%, I don't think I need to make the maths. I think it's very obvious that we're actually gaining from this. At this point in time, with just the purchase that we've made, we have a 31% gain in our investments in Atlantic Lithium. And at this point, we've not even disbursed the cent. But because we've actually locked in the agreement, we've actually made a gain of 31% in this planned investment. I will not go into the Asori. For the $5 million investment that we've done in the holding company, we are looking at an intrinsic value of $24.4 million. This is just for 3% and from 5% investment that we have made. Again, we looked at the opportunity that the shares at that time were undervalued, and we exploited that opportunity. The graphs, the graphical illustration, I believe, gives the press a fair idea of the gains that we've made, which I illustrated in terms of the gains that MIF and the government have made. At this point in time, at a recent offer of 0.33 by Asori to take over the company, which is ongoing, we are looking at an upside of our shares at 62%. From that 0.26% of the shares that we bought, we are looking at an upside of 62% as we speak. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will just end with the final slide. This is just an overview of the financial gain. Over the life of the mine, we are looking at 2.4 billion with average life mine of EBITDA of 316 million per annum from the MIF investment. $2 yes, dollars. Free cash flow over the life of mine is $2.4 billion. We've already talked about the percentage stake. Apart from the 13% free carry, MIF 6% gives Ghana 19%. Contrary to what I read this morning, that a lecturer from University of Ghana is alluding that an Australian company has 87% and government just has 13%. The largest shareholder of Atlantic has 25%. That's the largest shareholder of Atlantic. This is a listed company. The fact that we define it as Australian does not mean an Australian company having 87% and then, you create the ripples that can we go to Australia and do this? No. That biggest shareholder is actually a South African company. It's not even Australian. So we must look at things in proper perspective, I believe. And there's a Ghanaian local shareholder. That's about, we're looking at about 4.4% now because of dilution. The Ghanaian, that's the Barari. So if you really look at the Ghanaian interest, it's actually 4.4 plus 19. That's 23. And the government's aim for critical minerals is to aim at a minimum of 30%. And we've not even spoken about the listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange. So it's important that we engage. It's important that the media engages us and we give the right information. If you look at MIF's post-tax NPV on a wire alone, because we are looking at about 10 tenements, on a wire alone, we are looking at $19 million on our 6% paid interest and $195 million on the free carry value. In all, MIF's equity interest is now valued at $285 million based solely on Iwea's DFS. That's the definitive feasibility study. So the idea of the thinking that this does not inure to the benefit of Ghanaians, ladies and gentlemen of the press, is totally false. So since most of the bids have been finally articulated by the Minister and the CEO of Minerals Commission. We are open to questions, but I hope that this has given you a really broad-based idea of what MIF does and what our involvement in the Atlantic Lithium has in terms of beneficiation or benefits to the Ghanaian people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edward Nanaya Okoranteng, Chief Executive Officer of MIF. The presentations are just mind-blowing. There is so much that I didn't know before now that I believe Ghanaians have also had the benefits to know, including 1% revenue for community development. So imagine how transformative that will be for the people of Mfantsiman when it comes to so many social amenities, infrastructure within the 8 communities where this lithium mine is going to be situated. Also, it is important to note that throughout all the presentations by Honorable Minister and the Chief Executive Officer of Minerals Commission and MIF, they have continuously mentioned that, 1, the company will be listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange. So if you are in this room and you have the money, when the time or the need arises, you can also participate and get an interest in the company as a Ghanaian. So they are not keeping it as a reserve for only states or government participating. Ordinary Ghanaians, ordinary Ghanaian companies can also participate. And as mentioned by Minister, he says the agreement is subject to ratification by Parliament. So by that and all the other things that they have mentioned, they have followed all the legal requirements and also sought the best interests of Ghanaians in executing this lease agreement. So ladies and gentlemen, we are now on the Q&A session, but before I invite you for your questions, permit me to acknowledge our media partners who are covering this briefing live. If you just joined us, we are live on GTV, Metro TV, Joy News, City TV, Asempa FM, Adum TV, Asasi Radio, Movement TV, Kesben TV, ABC News GH, and streaming on Facebook at Ministry of Information. Please, if you have any question, this is the best time to ask. If you show by hand, they will bring the microphone to you. You mention your name and affiliation and proceed to ask your question. So I can see 5 hands, so let's take all of you for this round. Thank you. Please, your name and affiliation.
Thank you. My name is John Awuni, Kesben TV. Minister, former Chief Justice of the Republic, Madam Sophia Akufu, recently said the lithium agreement signed is not in the best interest of the country, and she's saying that persons who think the lithium agreement is good have undue benefits. Can you clarify on the former Chief Justice assertion? Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. My name is Cliff Ekufu, I write for the Ghanaian Times. I have here with me a report by City FM 97.3 FM, and it's dated January 17, 2018. The report states, and I quote, Ghana discovers new mineral, lithium. Ghana discovers new mineral, lithium in the Volta region in commercial quantities by the Minerals Commission. Now, I would want to find out, does this report not contradict the argument made for not going the GHADEC and the GISDEC route? Because per the explanation given, we're looking at the quantity of deposit and limited to Awoya, but the Minerals Commission's own report, that is, if it is true, means we have new finding at the Volta region, and there's the potential to discover new deposits. So, not going the GHADEC route, does this particular report not defeat that argument? My second question is, I would want to find out if we do have a lithium deposit in Winneba, and has that also been given on a lease, as we have heard the disturbances in Winneba in recent times. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. So we'll take the next, and then I saw Duke's hand at the back. But let's take to maximum 2 so that your colleagues will also get the opportunity. No, Mr. Atta, you can't ask 3, please 2.
Thank
maximum.
You. Oh.
But I'll even prefer if you ask just 1 so that everyone will get
As,
the opportunity.
The minister said the lithium lease must go to Parliament for ratification. GHANA, Atamensa, must go to Parliament for ratification. I want to find out, in the event it goes to Parliament and there are the proposed changes to the terms, would it affect the agreement you have already signed with the Barali Limited? Then 2, as Mr. AEC said, there's no geological data on lithium in Ghana. I'm surprised. I want to find out if that is so. Is government considering a plan of probably giving more resources to Ghana Geological Survey Authority to expand its scope of surveying for such a mineral, since it's very precious now? Any plan of expanding its scope of survey? Then my third question.
No, it's okay. Please, let's move to the next person.
All right, good morning. My name is Michael Obodu. I work with TV3. I want to understand when the refinery will
TV3. Okay.
When will the refinery begin operation, as, especially as the construction for the exploitation would begin? What percentage of the mined lithium will be refined locally? We already know that a U.S. firm has secured 50% deal of that lithium that will be produced. Do we have plans of following the Namibia example of refining everything we produce? And then also, just for clarification, I heard the boss from MIF speak about locking the price of the share price. I just want to understand how feasible that plan is, especially when we've already seen from the CEO of Minerals Commission that the price of lithium is falling. Isn't that to our disadvantage then? Thank you.
Okay. So we'll take, let's take Duke, and then, okay, I'll try and take the 2 of you, and that will be the only round so that Minister can respond to all of them at once. So we'll take Duke and Lancer, and then we'll take the last
My name is Duke Benta, TV3. One of the reasons why we go into negotiation rooms for some of these agreements with weakened lease is the fact that a lot of the risky prospecting and reconnaissance is done by such foreign entities who do it as a risk. They do that, they find the minerals in commercial quantities, and then we go in to negotiate. Does government have a plan going forward to commit to resourcing state entities to engage in some of these exploration activities, so that when we find the minerals, it's ours and we don't have to negotiate with anybody for such agreements for people to label it as shortchanging Ghanaians and all of that? And secondly, on record, the IEA has always been on these issues of negotiating for our mineral mining contracts, oil and the rest. Were they invited to the table in terms of discussions relating to this one? Did they decline? Were they there? Did they present it, or they just ignored it and they are still on their public concerns, bringing out sentiments? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take Lancer and then take the last person.
Thank you very much. My name is Musa Lancer with GH1 TV. The question has always been the issue of ratification. How soon are we going to get the agreement ratified? And Cliff asked a question on Winneba. People were threatening. A chief even threatened to make sure they kill people if they attempt coming there to mine. Has that come to that?
Where?
In the Winneba area.
No, but they are talking about.
No, he asked a question whether it has come
whether
to his
there
attention.
is a lease or any such agreement in Winneba.
Yes.
Okay.
To the extent that the Ramsar site in Winneba has been sold. Yeah. The Ramsar site in Winneba is in contention now. The youth are saying it has been sold. The MP said it's not true, it has not been sold. Has it come to the attention of the minister? And if so, what are they doing to deal with the situation in Winneba before it gets out of hand?
Okay, thank you. So we'll take the last question.
Hello, this is Yinka Ibukun from Bloomberg News.
Okay.
I have two questions.
Your name again?
Yinka.
Yinka, okay.
Yinka Ibukun from Bloomberg News. My first question is about, there's a sense from all the presentations that there is a concern about delivering for the Ghanaian people, but also being competitive for investors. Now, you've set a royalty rate at minimum of 7%. Can you explain a bit how you compensate for that and how you hope to be competitive for investors at a royalty rate that you've said is one of the highest in the world besides Chile? And my second question is just to clarify, so we're looking at 11%.
Okay. She's saying your royalty rate is one of the highest in the world. How competitive? Yes, okay. And my second question,
thank you, sir. My second question is about the 11% that's going to be listed, because we're saying 30% and 19% is already state-owned. So if we can get more color on that, the timeline, and if it's actually mandatory that the 11% should be listed on the Ghanaian Stock Exchange.
Okay. Thank you for the questions. So we'll invite Honorable Minister for his responses. I'm leaving mine. Okay.
Yes, so, Madam Minister, thank you very much, and thank you to my friends for asking these very probing questions, which I believe are very much in order, and I should commend those who asked the questions. They are very interesting questions. Now, because the questions are many, you will probably have to indulge me to go through them systematically and try to figure out who asked what question and attempt an answer. The first question, I believe, was asked by Mr. John of Kesbin, and your question is on the former Chief Justice of our country, her ladyship, Sophia Kufu, criticizing this transaction and going further to indicate that anybody who supports the transaction must be unduly benefiting from the transaction. First of all, I am very happy, and I want to say government is very happy to listen to superior argument or superior alternative or superior propositions from Ghanaians and from Ghanaian institutions, civil society, academia, and the rest. I mean, much more a personality who is occupied a very high office of Chief Justice. So if the Chief Justice puts forward an alternative, a critique, suggestions, proposals, which are superior to what we are doing, I mean, the most important thing is that we structure an arrangement and we construct a deal which is in the interest of Ghana, all of us. I mean, so we all will have the benefit of it. But so far, unfortunately, I have not heard anything in particular that the former Chief Justice is put on the table. I mean, to say, for example, that 10% royalty is not good. You should have gotten 15%, or that you negotiated for a community development fund. You should have done something else, or that this particular jurisdiction did it that way, so you should go on that route. We've not gotten that. I mean, you heard from the presentation, for example, that when it comes to royalties, when you go to clause 20A of the agreement of the lease, the royalty rate which we've negotiated for is 10%. 10% royalty rate all mining companies in Ghana from 1957, since we gained independence, pay royalty rate of 5%. Newmont pays 5%. Goldfields pay 5%. Anglo Gold pays the same. You name it. Cardinal, all of them. The negotiated royalties 5%. We successfully negotiated 10%. When you go to Australia, which controls some of the biggest deposits of lithium, their royalty rate is 5%. When you go to Mali, that has a bigger deposit of lithium, almost 3-4 times bigger than ours, they charge 6%. When you go to Zimbabwe, they have a bigger deposit of lithium than we do, they charge 5%. Your government, the Ghanaian government, is negotiated for 10%. So if the former Chief Justice says that is wrong, you should have done 20% because of this and that reason. The lady from Bloomberg, and Bloomberg is one of the leading authorities when it comes to metals, when it comes to minerals. Everybody knows that. I've been to Bloomberg. I've had multiple interviews with them. She asked the question that this 10%, is it not going to make your industry uncompetitive? Atlantic Lithium has swallowed it. Is it going to be the case that a lot more companies will refrain from coming to Ghana because you are charging a high royalty rate? So this is the point. I mean, the discussion gets a lot more productive if we have alternatives. She's not giving any alternative. For example, you go and look at corporate income tax rate. The corporate income tax rate we are charging here in Ghana in this transaction is 35%. Australia is charging 30%. Mali is charging 30%. Zimbabwe, our counterpart sister African country, more deposits than Ghana, they are charging 25%. And Ghana, we've negotiated for 35% of corporate income tax rate. Then somebody says, it's a bad deal. Throw it away. And he doesn't or she doesn't give you an alternative that you should have done it this or that way. Lastly, you go to free carried interest. We've negotiated for 13%. And across the sector, free carried interest is 10%. Goldfields is 10%. Anglo Gold is 10%. Newmont is 10%. Cardinal is 10%. Golden Star is 10%. Ghana Bauxite Company is 10%. In this particular transaction, we have negotiated for 13%. And it was hard negotiations. As I said, in some cases, the president himself was involved in the negotiations. And he insisted. When we went back to him and said 8%, 7%, whatever, he said, no, this is a special mineral. Go back, negotiate upwards. We negotiate for 13%. So what is the point I make? And, you know, as you can imagine, I mean, she's a former Chief Justice, occupied the high office in our country, number 4 in the country. So it's a bit difficult to, you know, engage when it comes to a personality like that. But to say the least, I mean, one other point she makes, I mean, for that anybody who supports this transaction must have benefited from the transaction unduly. So here I am. I support the transaction. I must have benefited from it unduly. No evidence. No basis for that. No evidence, no basis for that. And when I went to law school first year, the good old law lady, her lordship, her ladyship, Chief Justice Sophia Akufu, taught me that the rule, the cardinal rule of the game is evidence. Every lawyer, when you make a claim, evidence. Because this is just a brush that is used to brush everybody who supports this transaction. And more or less casts insinuation and compromise all of us, our integrity. When we all know that the rule of the game is evidence. And that she put something on the table. That Minister Jinapo has some hidden company in offshore where he holds some secret 5% in this company, and that is why he's supporting the deal. Then we are having a proper conversation. But you make this statement that everybody, anybody who supports this transaction must be benefiting from the transaction unduly. Sam Jonah, one of the foremost leading mining administrators in our country. If I'm not exaggerating, I'm not too sure that there is anybody, AC and co-inclusive, who can match up to Sam Jonah's pedigree, at least when it comes to the mining sector of our country. When he was running the first biggest mine in our country, in Obuasi, you see Nko were still, first-year students at the minerals. Sam Jonah has come out publicly to say this is one of the best transactions Ghana has ever negotiated for in the mining industry. He's on record. It was published on the Daily Graphic. I read it. Per the logic, respectfully, very respectfully, per the logic of our senior stateswoman, former Chief Justice, Sam Jonah is supposed to be benefiting unduly from this transaction. Bloomberg, and I heard them myself, Bloomberg did a thorough analysis of this particular transaction and came to the conclusion that it's one of the best an African country is structured. Bloomberg must be benefiting from this transaction. Professor Richard Amankwa, Vice Chancellor of the University of Mines and Technology, a foremost, well-respected, well-renowned methodologist, very well-respected in the mining industry. Nobody can dispute that. He's on record to have said that this is one of the best transactions we structured. He must be benefiting unduly from it. Dr. Komna Donko, formerly Minister for Energy, former ranking member for Mines and Energy, former chair, he's a leading member of the National Democratic Congress. But you have to give it to him when it comes to matters of energy, power, and mining. He's an expert and he's well respected across board. His views are well respected. He's done a critique of this transaction. He's raised issues with one or two areas he believes we could have done better. But by and large, in the whole, he thinks that is a good transaction. Dr. Komla Donko must be benefiting unduly. So, it gets a little difficult to confront some of these things, but it's what it is. What I can say about and to our madam is just to say that, look, I'm reluctant to get into a bantam with her or to make comments which can potentially sound disrespectful, but really, our doors are open. If there's anything she has which is superior to what we have done, we are very happy to listen to her. But her comments are, to say the least, most unfortunate, and we'll move forward from there. Then the second question has to do with Ghana discovers lithium in Volta. That is a straightforward answer. No, we've not. Yeah, what we have is iron ore in Oti. Yeah, Volta, we don't. Then Atta Mensah of GNA talks about ratification to Parliament and whether or not Parliament can amend the agreement and what it will mean. Well, I will leave that to Parliament. I don't want to say anything which will prejudice the work of Parliament. When the agreement is laid before Parliament, I believe Parliament, through its own processes, will be seized of the agreement and will do justice to the agreement as they deem fit. And we will respect whatever decision is reached. And indeed, as I said, the agreement will be presented to Parliament by all means. They are very learned, experienced people in Parliament who understand these things, and we'll have the opportunity to make our case to them. And I believe that Parliament will take a decision in the interest of Ghana. There's no two ways about that. Atta Mensah also wanted to know whether we are going to have geological investigation. Yes, we have plans to do that. But before I even say anything else, let me just point out that this recognizance license was granted in August 2012. So the legal act was signed, sealed, delivered, and cast in iron as far back as 2012. So it is not as though, I don't want to be partisan here. Leave it at that. The facts are the facts. August 2012, a recognizance license was granted to Barari. And as I've explained comprehensively and copiously, when a recognizance license is granted and recognizance is done and prospecting is done, exploration is done, the company has a right of first refusal by law. So it was sealed as far back as August 2012. Now, government is taking steps through the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources and the Ghana Geological Survey Authority to begin mobilizing resources to empower the Ghana Geological Survey Authority to conduct its own exploration, particularly when it comes to the green minerals of our country. Because, as you can all imagine, it is dangerous to go to the negotiation table, literally blind if you want, without having any proper information to work with. So government is begun that exercise. The Minerals Income Investment Fund is being tasked to work hand in gloves with the Ghana Geological Survey Authority and provide them with the needed resources so that we can have what they call an aeroplane survey of our country, which can capture where we have lithium, where we have concessions, where we have compartments, so that we will be armed with the necessary information to be able to work with. Michael of TV3 talked about refinery and when the refinery will take place. My information is that as early as February, a report on the project economics of the refinery will be ready, and that will inform us on the next steps and the various phases we are going to have to go through to ensure that the refinery is built here in Ghana. But this negotiation was really thorough. It was really thorough. And I'll tell you why. For example, in the course of the negotiation, the issue came up that if Barari or Atlantic fails or is unable to build a refinery, what do we do? We, from the side of government, took the view that we would structure the clause to say that Barari and Atlantic Lithium will employ their best endeavors to build a refinery, but failing which, if a third party, in other words, a different company, were to come in to build a refinery, the company will have a right of off-taker from the lithium produced by Barari. So, whichever, and as I speak to you, there are multiple companies, some from Korea and the rest, who are already expressing interest to build refineries in Ghana. And so the deal is structured so tight to ensure that, come what may, we will have a refinery here in Ghana, and we will then realize the vision of the President Akufo-Addo, not to export raw lithium out of our country. Then there's a question of Namibia's refinery. Are you referring to Zinchen refinery? Zinchen? Yeah. But the interesting part of the Namibian one is that the company that is the refinery company in Namibia is called Zinchen. Zinchen refinery is owned by Chinese. It's a Chinese-owned company. So, I mean, I say this with a lot of respect. Sometimes when we read these things and we make these assertions, we have to drill down. We have to drill down. You talk. I mean, come in. There's no country in Africa that has a refinery. Right.
There's no country in Africa that has a refinery. No country that I know of. Yeah, they don't have a refinery. Right now, the difficulty most countries are going through is, what do you do with the concentrate? Because right now, Zimbabwe, the concentrate is being exported. They even do galamsey with their lithium. They put this one in bags and take it across the border.
So there it is. The Zinhai company we talk about is about to begin their work and operations. But the most important point I like to make is that company is a Chinese-owned company, and we need to be mindful of that. Then Duke from TV3 talks about will government find resources to conduct exploration? I think I've answered that already. And then the issue of Winneba, which is the Yenko Forest Reserves, which is where Abuachiri, the antelope, is found, isn't it? I want to give a very straightforward answer to that. And I give the answer to 3 different areas. Yenko Forest Reserves, where you have Abuachiri, Moli National Park, which is a forest reserve in my own constituency of Damango, Kakum National Park. And I want to very respectfully plead and crave your indulgence as the fourth estate of the realm that we should continue to establish the facts, establish the truth. Establish the truth is absolutely important. A mining lease is being granted in respect of a particular forest reserve is easily verifiable from the website of the Minerals Commission. So it is either a mining lease is being granted or a mining lease is not being granted. And to that extent, let me very emphatically and without a shred of equivocation indicate that there is no mining lease in respect of Yenku Forest Reserve, which is where the abuachry takes place. There is just no mining lease. So anybody who claims that there is a mining lease covering Yenku Forest Reserve where abuachry takes place, with the greatest of respect, it's a figment of the person's imagination. It's not correct. It's not true. And you can check that. You can verify that from the Minerals Commission. 2, that's another matter. That's another matter altogether. I will get a geologist come and answer that question. Don't worry. Yeah, but the claim, the allegation, the assertion, which is generated this, in my view, needless controversy and uproar, is that there is a mining lease covering abuachry. There is no such mining lease. 2, Moli National Reserve, there is no such mining lease. Kakum National Park, there is no such mining lease. And I was drilled and grilled and pushed and shoved during the budget presentation. I won't mention the media house. The media house asked me for an interview to discuss the presentation of the finance minister. And almost 1 hour of an interview, nothing about the budget, no question about budget. Everything was on Kakum National Park. And I kept insisting that there is no mining lease in respect of Kakum National Park. So far as I'm concerned, we could have concluded that part of the interview in 2 minutes for us to move on to discuss the budget. But no, we went on and on and on. You should Google it and find it. It will be on YouTube. It was quite hilarious. But anyway, the truth is that no mining lease in respect of Yenkum, Moli, Kakum National Park. And I think the final question is from Lanza from GH1. No, there's Bloomberg. From GH1, who wanted to know about, is there any lease in respect of Winneba? Same question. Okay, so I've answered that. When will we get a ratification done? How soon? We have to go to Cabinet, and then from Cabinet, we will take it to Parliament. I believe Q1. I think it's I believe Q1. All things being equal, Q1. Okay. Bloomberg. So Bloomberg asked a very interesting question, and I think a very enlightening question about 10%. And Madam, I think it's a matter we need to examine carefully. I think the CEO of the Minerals Commission and the CEO of MIF should take a critical look at that. They should take a critical note at that, and to find out and to examine and satisfy themselves whether or not the fear that Madam Yinka is entertaining may not happen. Because we don't also want that. We want a lot more investment into our lithium industry. And as much as we are proud and happy that we've been able to negotiate a high royalty rate, it mustn't also become a disincentive for attracting investment. Because if Zimbabwe is charging 5%, why will they come here? And they also have the resources there. And if you were to reduce the rate, what happens to Atlantic Lithium and all of that? It's a conundrum that I believe the two of you with your technical teams should look at. And then finally, Madam Yinka wanted to also know about 11%. The listed, yes, the listing. So the regime for the listing is this. as you know, already, government has a free carried interest of 13%. MIF is participating at 6%. It works up to what? 19%. And therefore, you are right in saying that what happens to the 11%? The plan and the policy is that whatever participation beyond foreign participation should now be Ghanaian participation. The 19% is state participation, as you know. Of course, MIF is a state fund, but if you strip it of anything else, it's a state entity, so it's state participation. 13% obviously will be held by the state. So 90% is state participation. So the 11%, which then takes us to the minimum of 30%. And I want to emphasize that that minimum of 30% is in accord or the same as the requirement for minimum Ghanaian state participation in respect of GHADEC and in respect of GHADEC. So even the argument that we should have set up a Ghana Lithium Development Corporation, we've dealt with that. We've answered that through this minimum 30% participation, because at the heart of GHADEC and GHADEC was to insist that whatever bauxite or iron ore operations which will take place in our country, there must be a state Ghanaian participation minimum of 30%. In this particular case, the policy which was approved by the government of President Akufo-Addo also insists that there should be a minimum of 30%, which is why we've already gotten a participation of 19%. The 11% will be worked out at the level of the Ghana Stock Exchange. And we are insisting that the persons who will be eligible to hold shares at the Ghana Stock Exchange up to that minimum level must be Ghanaians or Ghanaian entities. And I recall the president in the course of discussing this matter, I recall vividly, the president posing a question to the chief executive officer of the Ghana Stock Exchange. I've forgotten her name. Madam Abenamwa, yes. The president posing a specific question to Madam Abenamwa, the chief, that what measures are you going to put in place to ensure that we do not have fronting, so that people subscribe to shares on the Ghana Stock Exchange in respect of this lithium operations, but when you dig and you go beyond the layers, it is actually foreign owned. And she assured the president through a plethora of measures they are going to put in place to ensure that if it's Mr. Jinapo who has bought a share in Atlantic Lithium on the Ghana Stock Exchange, it's indeed Mr. Jinapo, a Ghanaian, and not Mr. Jinapo fronting for a Chinese or an American or Australian. So it's a minimum of 30% on the Ghana Stock Exchange. We have 11% to go, but it can be more. It can go as far as 50%. And we can get to a point where this mining operation will end up becoming wholly Ghanaian owned. But you have to put in place the measures and the regulations in place to lead you to that point. We are now at 19%. We hope to ramp up when they list on the stock exchange to a minimum of 30% and beyond. So, Madam Minister, my Deputy Minister, Chief Executive Officer, members of the press, first of all, let me thank you very much for honoring our invitation. We are going to endeavor to publish all the presentations on the Minerals Commission and the Minerals Income Investment Fund's websites, so that you have access to my presentation, the presentation of the CEO of Minerals Commission, the presentation of the CEO of the Minerals Income Investment Fund. And we do this because we want absolute transparency in this whole arrangement. We thank you very much, and I want to reiterate that under the able leadership of President Akufo-Addo, whatever we do with our mineral resources, lithium inclusive, other green mineral resources inclusive, will be in the interest of the Ghanaian people and will be done with the utmost respect for transparency, for integrity, for candor, and for good faith. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
On behalf of my boss, the Minister for Information, Honorable Kojo Opon Kroma, management and staff of the Ministry of Information, I would like to thank you, first of all, Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, and your deputy, and the chief executive officers of MIF and Minerals Commission for making time for this very important exercise. I believe in the past 2 days, the kind of explanation and engagement has really enhanced Ghanaians' appreciation of even what lithium was. When I saw the stone, I said, I've seen so many of this. I should have gotten a sack and start packing. I didn't know this was a mineral, but it's been an eye-opener. So this engagement has been very useful, and I would like to thank you and your respective teams for making time to join us. To the press, I believe you have the platform to continue the conversation for all of us to tease out whatever issues that may be until a time that the parliamentary ratification happens. And even the establishment of the company proper, I mean in terms of construction and work on site starts. So it does not end here, and we only want to plead with you to carry us along as we continue this public education and sensitization campaign on Ghana's first lithium contract. I would also like to acknowledge our media partners who picked this press briefing live: GTV, Metro TV, Joy News, City TV, Asempa FM, Adum TV, Asasi Radio, Movement TV, Kesben TV, ABC News, GH. Thank you all for your time, and we hope to see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.